decades, US policy was all about Wall Street, but now a huge economic reset is happening. So what is financial stability really? Is it just about saving big banks? The answer is changing big time. The old playbook is out. We're talking a complete flip from protecting Wall Street to prioritizing Main Street.
But why the big change? Well, to get it, you gotta look at what went wrong before.
The diagnosis? Globalism came at a huge cost, hollowing out the American middle class. And that led to a totally new game plan, one focused on economic security for American workers. The official fix comes from a group called the Financial Stability Oversight Council, or FSOC. And their latest report is a total game changer. It redefines their entire mission. For the first time ever, financial stability is officially linked to the health of the real economy. So it's not just about stopping market crashes anymore. It's about making sure you are secure. Okay, so how are they actually going to do this? Let's get into the action plan. FSOC has new working groups. Check them out: market resilience, AI, and household resilience. But that household resilience group, that one's the real game changer here. Seriously. Its job is to watch over the financial health of regular American families. That's a first. The thinking is, if households are strong, they can handle shocks and keep the economy going. And all this is happening while the US is facing massive debt, which really raises the stakes. This is a huge shift. We're moving from saving the casino to fixing the foundation. So the big question is, will this bet on Main Street pay off and make the economy stronger?
Yes, indeed. Welcome to Act 3 on our Gravity Shifts series. Act 3, the real risk to Europe isn't Russia, it's math. Yeah, it's like so crazy. You cannot talk about Europe or Ukraine or so many issues, anything that has to do with Donald Trump. You cannot have a adult conversation, right? Everybody just goes into immediate hysterics. But if you look at things through a sober lens, right, without getting all hysterical and animated, you can get a pretty clear view about everything that's going on. And I'm going to refer us to these two documents that came out recently. These are shaking up the world. This was published in November of last year. This was published, towards the end of the year, right? So the Financial Stability Oversight Council, along with the National Security Strategy, they all define, right, since Dodd-Frank, since the financial collapse, everybody's been talking about financial stability, but nobody's defined it. So the Trump administration has defined what financial stability actually means, and we talked about this last time we were together, and that that definition of financial stability moves the United States away from the global financial order, and says financial stability isn't just making sure that banks don't collapse, it's making sure that savings and investments and that homes and mortgages and health costs and all the things that make up the family are solid. And that's what financial stability is. So you've got London freaking out, you've got China freaking out, and you can really sort of see this America First thing through a different lens as far as Greenland's concerned, Venezuela, the Ukraine war, because for the first time, what we have is the prioritization of the American worker being articulated, right? Being articulated in these documents. They're saying we need to prioritize the American worker, and we need to tell the allies time to get your big boy pants on. You guys got to grow up and take care of yourselves, and to achieve energy dominance and to achieve energy independence. And these are clearly defined in these documents, right? So there should be no like hyperventilating and hysteria when talking about things like, these hot button issues that everybody seems to get so wound up about. So we're going to talk about the real risk to Europe, all right? And if Europe's biggest challenge were only geopolitics, the solution would be straightforward, but it's not. Europe isn't just facing external pressure, right? It's not just external pressure from China or Russia or whatever. It's carrying internal structural stress at the same time. Europe's population is aging rapidly. Birth rates across the European Union are well below replacement levels, meaning the working age labor force is shrinking while dependency costs rise. That's not speculation, that's Eurostat data. Without immigration, and this is the key point to this broadcast today, because immigration is such a hot button issue. Demographic projections show that without immigration, Europe could lose a massive portion of its population by the end of the century. Yet immigration itself has become politically volatile across the continent, creating social tension and policy paralysis. At the same time, Europe is still digesting the aftershocks of its energy dependency on Russian gas, cost spikes, industrial pressure, and strategic vulnerability. Layer that onto a regulatory environment that slows innovation, capital markets that lag the United States, and uneven adoption of artificial intelligence, and you start to see the deeper problem. And you see this within Europe. The European Union, like their crowning achievement is throughout Europe, you get cigarettes without a label. It's just a black label with some warning and some horrific cancerous tumor or something. It's like this whole keeping people safe, that whole thing, that whole way of trying to control the population has now come to bite them in an existential way. So Europe feels overextended, socially underpowered, strategically, and at exactly the moment the global system is becoming more competitive, more fragmented, and less forgiving. These internal pressures matter because when external security guarantees weaken, internal resilience becomes the real source of stability. If America is walking away, say, hey, all right, the Hague commitment, you guys got to put up 5% of your, of your GDP. And now with Greenland, if they bring NATO troops and NATO troops occupy England, that whole thing is over, right? So, and now Europe's internal balance sheet is under real stress. So, we're gonna go through this really quick, and I'm gonna reference everything that we're talking about here. Okay, so let's talk about aging population and labor scarcity. Europe's population is aging fast, shrinking the working age workforce and increasing dependency burdens, a structural drag on growth and system resilience. All right? The EU fertility rate is below replacement levels at 1.46 children per woman. And natural population decline is underway. So this is an incredibly interesting sort of paradox, because Europe and America feel the weight of migration, the weight of their culture, their Western culture, sort of being integrated with Islamic cultures, or just whatever, Somalian cultures in the United States, just cultures that don't necessarily assimilate that well. They feel like a little bit crushed and squashed in their own communities, right? So the European Commission data shows Europe's fertility rate is well below replacement levels, meaning Europe will struggle to sustain its workforce without population inflows. All right, and these Eurostat projections, without migration, the EU could lose 1/3 of its population by 2100. All right, with these dramatic declines in working age labor force. 1/3 of its population without migration. It's such an incredible paradox. It's such an incredible problem for it that Europe's gonna need to figure out. So, number two, immigration fatigue meets demographic reality. Europe faces a political contradiction. Right? Its demographic future depends on immigration, but immigration is politically unpopular in many member states, creating social pressure and policy paralysis. And let's take a look at that. All right, so we've been talking about that here. Let's take a look at that, right? Without migration, a 75% decline. With migration, a 75% gain. Without migration, with migration. That's how serious the problem is with Europeans not making babies. You know, we've been told for how long have we been told that there's not enough resources, we shouldn't be having children, we're going to overpopulate the earth. I've heard that since I was a kid. And so now that view of the world is being challenged by the math that says you need at least 2 children. Women need to give birth to at least 2 children for the population not to decline. And so you see that really good here, with this Guardian graphic right here. All right. And so energy vulnerability is point number 3. Europe's energy system was tightly tied to Russian energy imports for decades. I remember Trump going up to Merkel, was like, "You're talking about this Ukrainian war against Russia. Aren't you buying Russian oil, girlfriend?" She was like, "Oops, busted out." Decoupling has reduced vulnerability but created cost, supply instability, and economic drag, exposing a strategic fragility, especially in Europe, where they're talking about they're so focused on green energy and the carbon narrative that the earth is going to end with the exhaust and the cow farts and all of that. And so all of this, so Europe's attempt to pivot away from low-cost Russian energy and replace it with high maintenance and the high cost of solar and wind, which can't in any way replace what nuclear or coal or oil can provide as far as energy, right? Europe's attempt to pivot away has created the shock waves that have slowed growth and increased production costs, and has actually created a German economic crisis. And it's of their own doing. It's something that they've created with their own policies. So if we move on to point number 4, Europe, especially places like France and Germany, right? Big time, it's historically has been a big time regulatory environment. And so Europe's regulatory environment in general, though aimed at harmonization and safety, right? We gotta save the people, often shows innovation at its costs, especially for small to medium enterprise and digital startups, right? So all of this regulation just slows the ability to get anything off the ground. And we see that in this article here. The OECD says reducing internal market barriers and regulatory burden is key to improving productivity. And European institutions themselves note that regulatory burdens hinder competitiveness, especially in digital and tech sectors. So right when AI and freedom of expression, freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, right now, as it's just this tidal wave, this new wave of flow of information and ideas, Europe is just freaking out and trying to pull back. Even the EU's own innovation strategy admits that heavy regulatory requirements squeeze productivity and slow business dynamism. So, capital flows and competitive lag. Europe's capital markets are less dynamic than the U.S.'s venture capital, innovation, investment, and startup scaling lag behind. Europe's capital markets are less dynamic than that of the United States. Like, by far. You know, innovation, investment, venture capital, startup, scaling all lag behind, pushing talent and capital towards the USA and towards Asia. And you can see that this is not just me talking, but that's the findings between this Elcano Institute. Finds that Europe's venture capital innovation intensity trails the USA, limiting high-growth tech development. Europe's key capital markets lag behind the United States and China, meaning venture capital and tech and innovation are gravitating away from Europe's economy. So, because America is it's not like just this subliminal, slow sort of thing. It's a policy related in stone. It's a policy related within these, what's the other document right there? Within these two documents. All right? It's saying, look, we're putting America first in, not just in words, we're putting America first in terms of workers, of jobs, of families, of mortgages, health care. Everything that makes the family better is what we're going to be the household. Everything that makes the American household more stable. Savings, investments in stock market or in gold or whatever, less regulation. It's all defined in these recent documents. And so, my last point is the AI disruption, which America is fully embracing. It's like, bring it on, come on, let's do it, let's go. It isn't being evenly absorbed in Europe. AI could be a competitive force multiplier. It could be the salvation which makes Europe more competitive. Combine the history of places like France, Germany, Spain, their rich culture, and then use the force multiplying factor of AI, it would be a unique voice in the world. But slow regulatory processes and uneven digital skills and fragmented policy frameworks slow Europe's ability to harness the AI revolution compared to the United States and China. And so we see that here in this study here, Artificial Intelligence Across Europe, a study on awareness, attitude, and trust. Research shows Europe's AI adoption landscape has significant gaps in awareness, skills, and governance compared to faster adopters. Studies demonstrate that European AI adoption remains uneven, with gaps in skills and policy frameworks limiting competitiveness. So let's go through this real quick. Demographic drag. Point number one, European populations are aging and birth rates are below replacement levels. This is an opinion. It's an official EU demographics reality. Europe's working age population is shrinking, leading to labor shortages and increased support burdens. Right. Immigration tension. Eurostat projects that without immigration, Europe could lose 1/3 of its population by 2100. Yet public opinion and politics are increasingly hostile to migration, a contradiction with strategic consequences. Next point was energy fragility. Germany's dependency on Russian gas left it strategically vulnerable and exposed Europe to cost shocks when that supply was cut off. People were actually, I remember hearing last year, people, I don't know how it is this year, I'm sure it's not much different, but they were saying people were freezing because they were so used to this cheap Russian oil, and then when they tried to integrate this green energy, it wasn't working, it wasn't happening. So once the supply was cut off, that exposed a broader European energy fragility that policy makers they're still sorting through. And so the next point, regulation versus innovation. Even the OECD, the European Commission, and the European Commission acknowledge that high regulatory burdens slow business dynamism. And dynamism and productivity in Europe. That's a structural growth issue. That's something that is baked into the cake of Europe because they have such a socialist, what we would consider just a rope in our throats is just normal for the Europeans. They're used to all this paperwork and all of this regulation, and the government sticking their nose everywhere they can possibly go. Independent competitive analysis shows Europe's venture capital and high growth sectors lag the US, pushing capital and talent away from the continent. And lastly, the AI absorption challenge. AI is a strategic frontier, but Europe's AI adoption, skills base, and governance landscape are uneven, meaning it risks falling behind in the next wave of productivity and growth. So that's the breakdown. See, I thought that was pretty good. We did that. I think we could be proud of ourselves. We did that without becoming hysterical, and a very mature conversation, which is something that's really difficult to have these days. So that was Act 3 in our Gravity Shifts little mini-series here. The real risk to Europe isn't Russia, it's math. All right. Do the math. All right, outstanding. All right, not too bad in terms of time. Trying to keep these relatively short, it's difficult. A lot of things to talk about. Thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much. Au revoir.